Greetings, fellow humans. I'm MartianBuu, and today we had the Mythical Island set for Pokemon Pocket go live. So there are a bunch of new cards to build decks and talk about. I've put together some ideas that I thought were interesting with the new cards, and I'm just going to go through them with you and the philosophy behind those lists. Something to note, the site that I used for this is not fully updated yet, so it has all of the cards on it, but it shows like what booster pack you get the cards from, and it doesn't have the symbol for Mythical Island yet, so the things that are from the new set are showing up as genetic Apex. So the cards are new, so I think it'll be easy for you to spot, and it's otherwise accurate as far as like where the original cards come from, but there's that. But anyways, I'm going to start off with some existing decks that have had upgrades, and then as we go through, we'll get into some slightly spicier things. And hopefully this will give you some ideas for what to do with what you pull, or what to craft, or whatever. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first up, we have Mewtwo Gardevoir. So this deck is just like it used to be. We have the Mewtwo here. It's trying to do Side Drive for 150 and Gardevoir to power it up. We have the obvious upgrade of Mew EX we can talk about, but then we have a much more significant upgrade to the deck, which is Mythical Slab. So first of all, we have Mew EX. What's really nice about Mew EX is two things. First of all, it allows this deck to actually one-shot a Charizard, right? So Mewtwo EX only does 150, Charizard has 180, but deals 200. So if the Charizard gets up, this deck is kind of hosed. But with the Mew, you can use genome hacking to copy the Charizard's attack. It actually does not need the required energy on the defending Pokemon, so it'll just get to do the 3 for 200. So it covers one of Mewtwo's big weaknesses, which I think is a big important thing. It's also a way to take advantage of going first with this deck. So right now, before these cards came out, if you went first, you would have Ralts on the field, and Mewtwo EX would be active. You would attach no energies, go to turn 2, evolve to Kirlia, attach 1 energy to your active Mewtwo, go to turn 3, attach 1 energy to your active Mewtwo from your energy zone, and then 1 from Gardevoir. It's sitting there with 3 total energies on it. It can still only do 50. So going first doesn't do the deck any good. But 3 energies is enough for Mew EX. So you can actually leverage going first with this deck now that we have Mew EX as an alternate attacker. So those are like why I think Mew EX is a good upgrade for this deck. But even better, like this got the best card in the set in my opinion. Mythical Slab. So it's an item, right? These decks are starved for useful items and supporters to put in. And this is a really good one that's only for Psychic. So look at the top card of your deck. If that card is a Psychic Pokemon, put it into your hand. If it's not a Psychic Pokemon, put it on the bottom of your deck. So you use this card when you're looking for Kirlia or Gardevoir or something to evolve your Ralts in play or whatever. You don't use it when you're hoping for like Giovanni or Sabrina or Pokemon Professor's Research or something like that. But if you're looking for your evolutions, one of two things happens. Either you hit a Pokemon, in which case you've drawn a card for one item that's like as good as Pokeball, or you missed the evolution and you've put whatever useless thing that isn't a Psychic Pokemon on the bottom of your deck. So in either way, you've progressed yourself towards your Kirlia and Gardevoir. So it's just a way to shorten your deck size, basically, kind of along the same lines of Pokeball, except this can actually hit the thing you want to find. So yeah, it's really good redundancy. It's really good deck thinning. I think this is going to make this is going to give Mewtwo a little bit of an extra consistency edge. You're going to find your Kirlia and your Gardevoir more often. This deck actually did get one more thing that I didn't put in here. There's a Sigilif with 80 health, and its attack is 1 Psychic for deal 10 and draw a card. So it's like, that's a Psychic Pokemon that has the Meowth attack, but it has 20 more health. So if you want, I think that's a good inclusion for this. I think what I'd cut is one of the Sabrinas to add that if I was going to have that. It would also increase the amount of Psychic Pokemon in your deck total, so Mythical Slab would be more likely to actually draw a card. It's just like Pokeball is less likely to draw the Pokemon that you want to to find if you do that. So I don't think that it's strictly better to put it in, but I could definitely see it being worth it. So if you want to cut a Sabrina for a Sigilif, I think that's definitely worth doing. Then we have Pikachu. So another big winner. Pikachu got 2 lightning support Pokemon that I think are actually worth including. Before, other than Zapdos EX, we just had kind of the best of a bad situation. Like, we would just put things in because we had to put something in, and everything is basically as good as everything else. But 2 of the big good ones were Zebstrika, which for 1 lightning deals 30 damage to the bench, and Pincurchin, which for 2 lightning deals 30 damage and flips a coin for paralysis. So we need lightning Pokemon on our bench because of Pikachu EX's Circle Circuit. So it does more damage for each lightning Pokemon on the bench. Ends up being 2 for 90 if you have a full bench. So Zebstrika is an evolution that has for 1 lightning energy deal 30. Here we have a basic Pokemon, which for 2 lightning deals 40. All right. So the fact that it's basic is way better because we don't have to include Blitzel and then evolve it into Zebstrika. We can just put the Electabuzz right on the bench and it's ready to go. What's also nice about it being an Electabuzz specifically is we can run Lieutenant Surge, right? Attack with our Pikachu, and then later on we can X-speed the Pikachu to the bench and Lieutenant Surge up to the Electabuzz and deal the 40 damage that way without having to, you know, power it up manually the whole time. So it gives us a good Pokemon to run Lieutenant Surge for. I think 1 is plenty. You definitely don't want to run 2 for this because that's like just a cheeky play you're going to do sometimes. The other thing is Dedenne. So the Pincurchin 2 for 30 flip for paralysis is just kind of like a Hail Mary play that you would do against something like a Charizard EX where the Pikachu is never going to be able to knock it out in 1 hit. So as long as you're just Hail Marying for a little bit of extra chip damage, that's kind of the extreme example, right? Like there are definitely other situations where you would want to chip away with your Pincurchin. But Dedenne does that for half the energy. So you get the flip for paralysis. It does 20 less damage, but you get to put in the chip and then you have the out of getting lucky into several paralysis in a row to soften something up so that Pikachu can one-shot it without you losing your last point. So yeah, this is a much softer upgrade than I think the Electabuzz is, but it also doesn't have to be just a late game out. It does something that the Pincurchin doesn't, which I think is more influential, which is to slow someone down in the early game. So if you start with Dedenne, you can just attach 1 energy to it and be paralyzing something early on while you find your benched lightning Pokemon and power up something. And it'll give you extra time to find all those things. So it's much better up front than Pincurchin was. It's a little bit weaker damage output wise for the Hail Mary situation, but you're Hail Marying anyway, so that matters a bit less. So I really like these 2 upgrades for Pikachu. I think that a lot of decks are going to look a lot more like this moving forward as far as Pikachu is concerned. Then we have Water Box. So it's kind of funny that like the big 3 are getting the biggest improvements. The big thing that the Water Box got is Vaporeon. So as often as you like during your turn, you can move a water energy from one of your benched water Pokemon to your active water Pokemon. So it kind of functions like Lieutenant Surge, except you can move it to any water Pokemon instead of very specific lightning Pokemon, like in the case of Surge. And it doesn't have to be your supporter. So the fact that Starmie EX has free retreat cost really takes a huge amount of advantage of this Vaporeon, right? So you're up active with your Starmie, you hit once or twice with Hydro Splash, the Starmie is close to getting knocked out, you retreat it, and then use Washout to move to either another Starmie or to Articuno EX. Either way, pretty good. I have in here a 2 Vaporeon, 1 Eevee line, and the reason is we don't really want to have Vaporeon out immediately, as like we want to have Starmie and Articuno immediately. Vaporeon is more like a once everything gets going already for a little bit, then we want the Vaporeon out. So we don't want to be hitting Eevee very often with our Pokeballs. Once we have an Eevee out, we want to find Vaporeon, and there isn't any tutoring for evolutions in the game right now. So we have 2 Vaporeon just so that we have increased odds of finding it once our Eevee is already on the field. But we don't want to find it early. We don't want to find Eevee early, so we only run one Eevee. The deck needs only one total Vaporeon out, so we never want to like be running 2 copies so that we can have multiple Vaporeon. We just need the one. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a soft upgrade, and it's going to take some testing to find out whether or not this is actually worth it or not. But I do feel like, you know, the Starmie having free retreat cost and is one of the big advantages of this deck, right? Like you get to avoid taking knockouts while still leaving your stuff on the board, and this, like your energy on the board. And by take knockouts, I mean you want to avoid giving up knockouts while also leaving your energy on board to be able to come back and hit later. Vaporeon just takes that to a whole nother level where you can use that energy on something else. You could also like throw in a Lapras here. I feel like Lapras is a little better with Vaporeon. Maybe you cut the second Vaporeon. I don't know. That seems a little sketch to me, but you know, if you can fit a Lapras in here somewhere, maybe at the cost of Articunos, I think it becomes a little better later on because the energies are already on the field. You can retreat into the Lapras and move the energies up, and it becomes a better late game threat. But, you know, this is all versus not Mewtwo anyway, right? Because Mewtwo just one-shots these things and it doesn't matter. But, you know, if you're up against a deck that can't knock out a Starmie or an Articuno in one hit, I think the Vaporeon helps a lot. All right, so those were all of the like existing decks that just kind of got some upgrades. Now we're getting into some new decks. So the Superior, each grass energy attached to your grass Pokemon provides 2 grass energy. This effect doesn't stack. So this is an ability that has existed for a long time in the paper TCG. There's just every once in a while a stage 2 grass Pokemon comes out with this effect. So it's kind of cool to see it manifest in Pocket. But we have the Superior in here just to enable other things, but it is kind of nice that it has a pretty decent attack, so 2 for 70 is not bad. It's especially good if you're going first, right? Because these attacks on the Snivy and the Servine aren't great for going first, but you know what? The Servines is okay for going first, actually. I take it back. Just the Snivies is bad for going first. But anyways, that doesn't matter. If you're going first, right, so you play Snivy, don't attach an energy, evolve. Man, I'm just a terrible liar. Yes, this is bad going first. Anyways, you play the Snivy, you don't get to attach anything. Next turn, you attach an energy, evolve to this. It doesn't get to attack. But the turn after that, right, you get to do 2 for 70 on your Superior. So at least the Superior can attack on curve because of its ability. But yeah, this is good if you're going second, I guess, and you're stuck with this thing active. This is just never a good attack. But anyways, we don't want to be attacking with this anyway. The Superior is only in here to power up our other things. We have we have one really good one and one kind of like wonky one that I think is just going to be fun. So the good one is Delmise. So basic 1-point Pokemon that with the help of Superior deals 2 for 90, right? So this thing has 100 health for 1 point, which is pretty good. If this Pokemon has at least 3 extra grass energy attached to it, this attack does 70 more damage. So it's a carbon copy of the Lapras, except its weakness is different and its type is different. But I think this is better than Lapras because Lapras requires Misty to be good, right? You need to hit a good Misty for Lapras to be doing any kind of real damage. And Starmie is just easier for the same amount of damage. But this, with the help of Superior, is just 2 for 90 on a 1-point basic. And I think that is really, 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 really good. And it comes with the help of Erica. So certain strategies that only deal a little bit of chip, like Weezing, for example, are going to have a lot, like a tough time dealing with the Delmise when Erica is going to back it up. But the funny card is Celebi EX. So 130 HP EX basic is fine. Powerful Bloom for a grass and a colorless. Flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon. This attack does 50 damage for each heads. Now, this is an attack that I really wish had manifested on any of the Exeggutor, because that's kind of his signature move. The Exeggutor usually does big explosion, and it works exactly like this. You flip a coin for each energy attached to the Exeggutor, and it does a certain amount of damage based on the heads. So it's kind of weird that we've printed 3 Exeggutor already, and none of them have this attack. But anyways, we do have a different grass Pokemon with this attack, and it's still just as funny, except it's not called Big Explosion, which is a little sillier. But you attach, 2 grass energies to this, and with a superior up, you're flipping 4 coins. So it's the Zapdos's attack for more damage but less energy. And it only goes up from there. You could attach 3 and then you're averaging 150 damage. So it's kind of nice because it gives you outs against things like Charizard and Mewtwo that you wouldn't otherwise have if your only attacker is Delmise. But I do think that this is going to be your more consistent attacker in a deck like this. But I'm excited to play this. It'll probably be the first deck I stream once I get streaming. I actually did pull 2 of the immersive Celebi, so I need an excuse to show those off anyway. Then we have Pidgeot Weezing. So Pidgeot got a couple of really cool things. And you know what? Weezing did too. So the Weezing Pidgeot idea is cheap attacker, I guess. So we have the Weezing to deal the early damage with Gas Leak and Tackle, and we follow it up with the Wing Attack from Pidgeot later on in the game, but also having access to Drive Off, which is Sabrina in the form of an ability, allows us to pick our Pokemon we're attacking a little bit more easily. So I had a lot of luck with that when playing before this expansion came out, but we got several upgrades to it. First of which is this Coughing. So the other one is 1 dark for 20 damage. This one is 1 dark for get a Coughing out of your deck and put it onto your bench. So this is a way to find your bench Pokemon easier. And once you've used this attack, your Pokeballs are now going to find Pidgeys, so it's going to be easier for you to find the Pidgey as well. I don't think it's a strict upgrade over the other one, because the other one dealing 1 for 20 interacts with the Psychic Pokemon's weakness, and the Psychic deck is better for this set, right? So you're going to be seeing more of it, so maybe this is better as a 1-1 split, or it's better as just use the old one, but I think in a vacuum, this Coughing would be better, so I'm showing it off here. So for the Pidgeot line, the Pidgey has less HP for 10 more damage, which I didn't think was worth it. For example, like Mewtwo would 2 for 50 one-shot the Pidgey, and we don't want that. And then the Pidgeotto has 90 health, which is nice, but it also has an attack that's completely unusable. I think it costs 3 energy and it deals like 50 or something stupid. So I think that Pidgeotto being able to leverage going first is good. So going first, you start Pidgey, then you evolve into Pidgeotto 1 for 30, evolve into Pidgeot 2 for 70 on curve. It's nice. Ideally, we'd always start Coughing, but that's not going to happen that way every time. But then we also have another big attacker. So while you're attacking with Weezing or with your first basic Pidgeot, you can be spending your extra energy on a benched Pidgey, and that you will eventually evolve into this. Its attack is 3 for 80, and it does 20 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So if they have a full bench, it's 3 for 140, which is pretty good. If you play a Giovanni on that, which I don't actually have in here, maybe we need a Giovanni for that reason. Because that could hit Mewtwo for weakness. So, or not for weakness, but could one-shot it if their bench is full. You don't have a lot of power over that, and Weezing is probably going to have dealt chip damage, so maybe it's not necessary. But, especially in situations where we drive off and then do this, maybe we do want that. Except if their bench is full enough, it wouldn't matter. So, I don't know. I don't know about that Giovanni. I don't know how useful that's going to be. Maybe it would take the Koga slot. I don't know. It's just the nice thing about Koga is that it allows you to get Weezing out of the active position. And you could do things like Gas Leak a Mewtwo, Koga it, come up with this thing, deal 140, and then it gets knocked out. So maybe we still just have that option. Anyways, just musing based off of thinking that through. But what's cool about this deck, in addition to having the big, high damage follow-up card and the new Coughing, is Pokemon Flute. So you use this to put a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile back onto their bench. You don't get to choose. It works just like Pokeball does. It'll just put something that's been knocked out back onto their bench. But because of Drive Off, you can knock out something frail, then Pokeflute to get it back on the bench, and Drive Off to bring it up. So your opponent not filling their bench is a liability, But if they fill their bench, then you deal more damage with this thing. So it's kind of, you can punish your opponent for however they're trying to play around your deck with the new Pokeflute. So anyways, I thought this would be fun to combo with the Weezing Pidgeot deck. I haven't tried it yet, but looks pretty cool. I still need to pull the Pidgeot, right? I haven't pulled this card yet, so I'll do that video as soon as I pull it. Next up, we have Aerodactyl, and I'm not sure what the perfect partner for Aerodactyl is, but I do know the partner that I want to use, which is this Onix. I really like Onix plus Brock, so 110 HP, 3 for 70 is bad, but with the help of Brock, it becomes essentially 2 for 70, right? We only need to attach to it twice. So 2 for 70 on a 110 HP basic is pretty good, so I always really like Onix, and the nice thing about running it with a fossil is we always start with Onix. So we're always going to be able to get going with Onix right away, and if we don't find the Brock, then it's just a meat shield while we power up whatever our secondary attacker is, which in this case is Aerodactyl EX. So the new Aerodactyl EX is like a better version of Marowak, because it deals 2 for 80 average instead of, or it does 2 for 80 flat instead of 2 for 80 average. I think 2 for 80 is good. It two-shots literally everything in the game that isn't a stage 2 evolution. But you don't have those horrible moments where the Marowak flips 2 tails. You don't get the out to flip 2 heads against something like a Mewtwo, but I don't think that matters as much as consistently dealing your average damage. So already I think this card is good. 140 HP on a stage 1 EX is pretty decent, and you know, the 2 for 80 is just good damage. But it comes with this cool ability. Your opponent can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their active Pokemon, and this can be very annoying for opponents that are trying to like power up a Charizard, for example. If your opponent has a Moltres active and they have flipped enough coins to be able to attack with their Charizard, they have their Charmeleon on the bench, you can Sabrina to bring up the Charmeleon if you're not ready to knock it out yet, and they're stuck there with the active Charmeleon, unable to evolve it unless they retreat first, in which case they have to give up energies or X speeds, but can't attack with the Charizard that turn. So that's just one example. You know, you can also, like, it matters a little bit less against something like Mewtwo, where they don't actually want to have their evolved Pokemon active. So like they'll just retreat and evolve Gardevoir on the bench. It won't actually matter. But for Pokemon where the attacker is an evolution, or for decks where the attacker is the evolution, Aerodactyl is going to be a big thorn in the side. And it doesn't even have to be active to do it, right? The Aerodactyl can sit on the bench, and just as long as you've had it out, you can put your opponent in a bad position, if they aren't already, with something like Sabrina to bring up their benched Pokemon. Really slows them down. So we get to run this Aerodactyl, but also because we're running the old Ambers anyway, we have the option to run the original Aerodactyl, which gives us a flip a coin if heads, shuffle your opponent's active Pokemon into their deck out, which, you know, depending on, you know, maybe we've Sabrinaed up their Gardevoir, or maybe they have a Mewtwo with 3 energies on it and we can just shuffle it back, or, you know, whatever. We can run this without having it be a dead card most of the time, right? We only evolve into this Aerodactyl if it makes sense, because we have an actual purpose for our old Ambers being the new Aerodactyl EX. So I thought this deck is really cool. Because it only runs the one basic Pokemon, we don't actually have use for Pokeballs, so I've put in basically all of the other filler stuff. We have Blue in here. I don't like this card generally. I know people say like, hey, you can play it, it defends against Articuno EX, but like, does that really matter? Usually Articuno EX deals its damage by dealing 80 twice and knocking something out. The chip damage matters a little, but it doesn't matter a lot. So we're not going to run this card specifically to deal with that, but since we're already running potions just to fill the deck out, we have the extra defensive capability of the blue, which will matter occasionally. And I also put in a Pokeflute. So this slot could just as easily be a red card if you wanted it to be. But I like the idea of our opponent has had a basic Pokemon knocked out. We can bring it back, Sabrina it up, and take our final point that way. It's just a way to like get an extra easy point if our opponent had something tanky up or something like that. And then the last deck I have for you is another Weezing deck, but this time it's with Mew. So the Mew is just kind of generally good, as it turns out. I think it's best in the Mewtwo deck because Gardevoir can power up psychic Pokemon. So even though genome hacking does not need psychic energy, it still values the Gardevoir because Mew itself is psychic, so you can actually accelerate more energy onto it earlier. However, we don't need to play it that way. Weezing really likes to play with Pokemon that require a lot of energies to do something big, because it only requires 1 energy to do a lot, right? So 110 HP, stage 1, 1 energy, it's already attacking, it has its gas leak ability, it does a lot for its 1 energy, or no energy even. And we can use the time that it's up active to power up something juicy on the bench. I frequently use Pidgeot or Wigglytuff EX, but those are all evolutions, whereas Mew is just a basic. So we can use the Weezing to chip away at something small or whatever, and then come up later with Mew to use the Mewtwo EX or the Charizard's attack and finish them off. So I think this is actually a pretty big upgrade for the Weezing deck, just to have this big old attack. I think this Tauros is also pretty decent. So the Mew requires your opponent to be attacking with very specific things in order for the Mew to be good, but it's a lot harder to play around the Tauros that way because it just does flat damage. So we can power up the Tauros while the Weezing is active and deal 120 to things like Pikachu EX, or, you know, we have Starmie and Zapdos that are 130 HP, and Mew even, that we can use Giovanni or a gas leak trigger to finish off. So I think it's a much more reliable attacker depending on what your opponent is attacking with as far as Mew goes. Like, for example, if we're in the Pikachu situation, right? Like, Mew isn't going to be able to damage the Pikachu because we don't have any lightning Pokemon on our bench. Circle Circuit is going to do terrible damage. But the Tauros can come up in that situation and knock it out. So we have an attacker that isn't reliant on our opponent running a specific type of attack for us to use on the Mew, if that makes sense. So I thought that was pretty cool. But also, the Weezing has Koga, right, to return it back to the hand. Mew has, for some reason, a fancy Koga as well. So put your Mew EX in the active spot into your hand. I think it's not worth running 2 of these, right? Because the Mew has 1 retreat cost. So we're only using this to heal a Mew. We're not using this to actually get it out of the active position as much. So I think it's just kind of funny to me that you can run 2 Koga into budding Expeditioner. So you could cut this for something like Pokeflutes. You could run the second Tauros, but I really think you don't want to hit the Tauros that often, so 1 is kind of a deliberate choice. You have some options you can play around with. You can run the second Giovanni even if you want to run 1 or 0, but I thought it was so cute to have extra Koga for your other Pokemon in the deck that I wanted to do my first list with the budding Executioner or Expeditioners in it. So I'll try it out, see if that's ever handy, but you never know, it might be awful. So that covers everything. Those were just like my early theory crafts for decks to play early on. We'll see once I test these out how they actually feel. You can find all these decks in the description. I'll have links to each of them. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. See you next time.